The Baltic, Kiel Bay in fact, now a paradise for yachtsmen, but 40 and more years ago, a cradle of the war at sea. Oddly today, it almost hides one of the lesser known of the war's sea stories, a story quietly enshrined in two splendid and elegant yachts, the Kranich and the Flamingo. Built in the 1930s as leisure and pleasure craft for the men of the German armed forces, they became the object of a bizarre search, and they ended up in 1946 as prizes of war. It is hardly surprising that little was known of the quest, for the news then from Kiel was this.
New film evidence of damage done to Kiel by our airmen shows in detail some of the German ships that have had it. Hamburg America liner New York was sunk. The 32-knot cruiser Admiral Hipper, a modern 10,000-ton ship mounting 8 8-inch guns, is not exactly in good shape either.
One small naval party, though, wasn't commissioned to look at destruction. Their job was to search for German service yachts and bring them to Britain. Among them, Lieutenant, now Commander, Peter Richardson.
We found in the yacht haven of the British Kiel Yacht Club, which was in remarkably good shape, a variety of different yachts. They ranged from Olympic 12 square meter Sharpies up through Stars, 30 square meters, 50 square meters, a few hundred square meters. It was quite astonishing how well preserved they had been, despite the rigors of war, and a matter of a few months after the war, to find a lot of them in commission and suitable for sailing was a real joy. We made the very best of it. I remember well going up to Eckernförde looking for a yacht and being told that I should go to a certain farm. This farm was a fair distance away from the head of Eckernförde Bight, and we were a little suspicious about this, but when we arrived, there was a barn, and oddly enough, it still had quite a lot of hay in it. And so we rooted around and eventually found a pitchfork and pushed it in until eventually it came to something pretty hard. And there was a very nice 30 square meter and a very shamefaced looking farmer who, of course, knew nothing about it, having been there. The whole business of rounding up the yachts on the list was an intriguing exercise. We had a lot of help from one or two very friendly Germans who were able to give us a few clues as to where we might look for them. Marabou was certainly the nicest of them all, and a real pleasure to handle and to sail.
In 1946, Peter Richardson was mate in Marabou, a sister of Flamingo and Kranich, and he sailed her back to Portsmouth. All part of the waywardly named Operation Homeward, in which more than 130 vessels were seized as prizes of war and nicely named Windfalls. The yachts went to British service establishments throughout the world. The Marabou later rigged as a ketch to HMS Hornet, the headquarters of the Royal Naval Coastal Forces at Gosport. Later to cross the Atlantic, compete in the fast net and tall ships race, and to sail in 1 year 16,000 miles. In 1977, she was sold to a private syndicate. In 1946, these prizes of war, the Marabou and many like her who were big enough to be sailed to England, were taken through the Kiel Canal and across the North Sea. The Kiel Canal, opened in the last century and designed to give the Kaiser's fleet a shortcut from the Baltic to the North Sea. Today, it's still one of the world's most important waterways, but for many, a peaceful one too. In Kiel now, there still lives a man who much remembers 1946, when the prizes of war were seized. The Windfall Yachts were to change his life. He's the German Olympic yachtsman Bruno Split.
I was lying with my minesweeper alongside the tip at Small. One day coming off a sea alongside with a motorboat and asking, "You from the fleet?" He said, "Well, that's me." "Come on," he said, and he took me to the Kiel Yacht Club, which was then already British Kiel Yacht Club. I was sailing instructor and later on in charge of all the boats the British had in these days. And the British was so fair to me. He gave me time to could go also with my own boat. I was lucky to be 5 times on the Olympics and to win a lot of big events here in this area and around the world. I had no idea in these days that a new life started for me.
That life was to work alongside the British in Kiel to run and maintain the windfalls that stayed in Germany. Among them, the Kranich and the Flamingo, both of them today part of the fleet of the British Kiel Yacht Club. British servicemen sail them now in sail training exercises, and they look after them as carefully as German servicemen did those many years ago. Nothing was spared in their building, nothing less than the best for the young men who, in a few brief years, would exchange the idyllic summers of the Baltic for sterner and more dangerous places. Perhaps the German crews knew, or maybe they didn't, but many who sailed these recreational vessels in the 30s became the Luftwaffe pilots who bombed the cities of Britain.
These boats that were built in 1936 to be used as part of Hitler's war preparations, perhaps. They've now changed their role, and they are now used by British forces and other forces as well. We've even had members of the German Army and the German Navy sailing on these boats, and they're now used as a different role within our own forces. When we go to sea in a boat, it's all real, and people have to get out of the situations they get themselves into. There's no way that if they decide to stop playing, they can get off and walk. And therefore, we can put a bit of fear into them, make them a bit worried, make them anxious, make them a bit cold and uncomfortable, make it really adventurous. After doing one of our courses here, I'm quite sure that the soldiers go back to their units as a better soldier, knowing a little bit more about themselves, about how far they can push themselves, what their limits are, both from the physical point of view and the mental point of view. They learn a lot about themselves at sea.
Major Bill Gore of the Royal Engineers. These days he works with crews of British servicemen who from units throughout Germany come to Kiel for spells of sea training, just as those long ago pilots of the Luftwaffe once did. And along the way they find the pleasures of sail. Like Bruno's fleet still does, retired now from the British Kiel Yacht Club, he still can't resist going to sea under the sails of the Windfalls.
Stand by, mine.
The Kranich and the Flamingo are handsome. Overall, they have the lithe, characteristic lines of the best of Baltic yachts. Their sterns are reminiscent of the Dragon-class yacht. Close-quarter tacking is not the easiest of manoeuvres in vessels of 57 feet overall and 38 feet along the waterline, with 100 square meters of sail. They draw 7 feet, these yachts. Their accommodation has been improved, but their glistening hulls are original, built of mahogany on frames of steel and oak. Their former cotton sails have been replaced by those of man-made fibres, but for all these modern embellishments, the British servicemen who sail them nowadays, Bruno with them, surely find all the joys that all their predecessors discovered. Over the years, thousands of service personnel have got their first taste of the sea from sailing in these lovely yachts, and for many the lure has lasted. Lieutenant Colonel Townsend was for 12 years in Kiel, and he still remembers the joy.
The first impression you get is tremendous power in the vessel. Perhaps not speed, but tremendous power going through the sea and throwing everything off. After you sail dinghies and small boats, the change is so great, it impresses you so much, something you'll never forget. They're classic boats, they're classic style of boats and the classic design. They're wooden boats, they've had a lot of interesting life. Their history is very interesting. And one has a sense of pride in them when you're sailing them because they've been kept so well, they look so well, and they sail so well. During the time when there was no support cost from the German economy, the boats had to be kept going on without public funds, and so the work that was done really by people that were dedicated to try and do the job. Both Kranich and Flamingo, I think, owe perhaps their existence to the dedication and the enthusiasms of the soldiers, officers, who spend a lot of their spare time in order to keep these boats up to the standard that they are now. And this dedication and this enthusiasm still goes on, as one can see.
Bruno Spleet still encourages that enthusiasm.
I really was in the merchant navy on the boat of my father. My father took it over from his grandfather, and so I growing up there, up to the war did start. And I already had master ticket before the war, and so when the war started, I had to go and do my job over there. In the war, I was commander on the minesweeper before I was teacher in the barracks. I was lucky to finish the war in Kiel. I was in the Far East, in the East Baltic, and we finished off at Kiel. And my papers, I was prisoner of war in the barracks of Kiel. I was standing in that I was German champion in sailing. And the British did find, I had no idea what was happening. They did find some people who know something about sailing for all that boats who arrived here, finished the war at Kiel as well. And they built up a yacht. They found a yacht club. They called it British Kiel Yacht Club. And then they find people in the camps who know something about to handle the yacht. And I was one of them.
For 36 years, Bruno worked alongside the British to help organise their sail training. The Windfall Yachts, in particular the 100 squares, became an essential part of his life.
We had about 4 of them, 400 square meters. That was Flamingo, which we're sitting on. That was Kranich, which is next to us. That was Avalanche. And then we had another varnish boat that belongs to a German owner. That was Königin. These 4 we had. And 3 we had in the water. And Kranich did break the mast very soon after the first sailing. And then we slipped him and we left him ashore. The inside was a lot of water, a lot of grass growing inside the boat. And one day a colonel coming alongside and said, "Well, Bruno, get this boat away from here. make a fire and burn it or disturb it. Because I did look the boat, it did look only bad. For an amateur, it did look only bad, but the body was okay. And though I had not disturbed it, I put it in the shade, in our shade, and put it in the corner and put some men out. And we built it up, and the boat's still going now. In a way, that's a part of my life, this boat. Not only this two, but especially the wooden boats. I don't know where they come from. I know the builders of these boats. And I know how good they are, how popular they are. And all my time, and when we had spare time with my stuff, they had to work on this boat to keep them like they look today. And so this boat and myself, it's a part of myself. I think every soldier, every young man, not only soldiers, should take a chance to go out with this boat. And the best waters in the world, I would say. I've been around the whole world, and I must say here, the Baltic, no tide. The lovely Denmark, very close. Go over the Baltic in 35 miles, then you're over in Denmark. And you have all sorts of conditions of weather that teach the man on a short area, I think, quite a lot. If they have later on a command, they know more than the people who miss that sort of thing.
Today, the crews of the Kranich and Flamingo, British now, inherit those same feelings and traditions.
Okay, Dave. Kan du snart göra det? Okay. No, wait a sec.
The intriguing story of the Windfalls and the 100 Squares has, across its course, involved the young men of two nations. But at its core are two yachts which are beyond national boundaries. The Kranich and the Flamingo belong to the sea, and they will always find a place and a purpose.
Sadly, since that programme was made, Brunner's fleet died in 1990.